Chair would smile upon a motion to open debate. Are there any points or motions at this time? Well, Mr. Mann, yes.
Motion to open debate.
That is in order.
I would like to discuss about veterans' experiences while at war and what that would do to their physical and mental health.
We need to help educate people who aren't in the military on what military personnel have to go through.
Making it mandatory during your training to have perhaps monthly mental health checks with a therapist.
While our end goals are promoting international peace and getting our goals achieved, we must prioritize the health and safety of our own citizens first.
I also really want to focus on reintegration, and yes, we need mental health resources, but also job training and educational resources.
Every day, our veterans suffer from the traumas of war and the negative health effects that are a result of their service, such as PTSD, lifelong, sometimes even generational consequences.
Educating the people to try and empathize with veterans, as that is really important to reintegration as shown in the excerpts, and educating the veterans on the services that are available to them.
And I would like to focus on better mental health counseling and healthcare because, firstly, many veterans come home from war with severe PTSD.
In the military, the physical injuries are the ones that people recognize, while the mental injuries that our service members endure while they're out there is what we really need to focus on.
And with that, I would like to invite our policy director up to the front.
So Helen Thorpe writes about, particularly the whole book is about 3 women that are in the reserve, and then they're called up to duty. And the one in particular that we read about in the excerpt is Michelle. Michelle was stationed in Iraq for over a year, and as many of you probably read in the excerpt, when she came back, one of the things that really stuck out to her was just civilian life was more complicated in the sense of how she felt relating to others and even just daily things. And so then she also talks about her experience going back to school. And one class where she's writing about the economy and different levels of poverty, she actually writes not about the domestic United States context, but asked her professor for the opportunity to write about Afghanistan. It's in that paper that for that class where she writes a 21-page paper and has this experience where she realized that was the first time she fully understood part of why the U.S. was in Afghanistan and part of what her role was. That is the general overview of Helen Thorpe.
So I think education has been a great bridge to reintegrating and finding a new purpose.
As we've seen in this story of Soldier Girl, we know that if we can educate these military personnel while they're at war and during training, then they will have a better understanding of why they are doing it, and therefore they will have an easier time reintegrating into society.
And I think Michelle in the excerpt was talking about how in the military you don't really have a lot of critical thinking. It's mostly just split-second decisions, not much thinking to it, and going to school helped her ease back into the ways of her old thinking.
I think it's important that we also recognize the hardships that she faced through her education. She talks a lot about how the age gap that she faced between the other students and herself really strained her ability to socialize with other students.
Michelle felt that many educators did not understand her and her experiences in war. We need to ensure that veterans' past experiences are acknowledged in educational institutions.
But I also think that we should have a part of the training that includes education on mental trauma and how PTSD and suicidal thoughts can develop and how to prevent that.
I propose that we offer a 10-hour required course about mental health and the toll war takes on a person's mental health. I think it's essential that service members understand what they're going into, especially so that they can mentally prepare for the hardships that they are going to face, but also so that they feel comfortable asking for mental health support while in the field.
10 hours is too much. This education needs to be over a period of time, as well as specific to the specific military personnel.
I agree with what many representatives have stated, that we need a course on mental health, and I do not think 10 hours is too much to be spread out over many weeks or months.
It's not necessarily about the total time spent on this training, it's more about making this a consistent part of their training and integrating it into their training.
We do understand the importance of mental health training. Regardless of what the curriculum will be, or how much they will be trained on these particular topics, we do need to have it multiple times per week, and we need to consult professionals on what the curriculum should be.
Vote on the motion to table the current topic. All those in favor, please raise your placards now. All those opposed? This clearly passes. We are now on to our next topic, which is redeployment.
I think it's really important to note that there's so much stigma surrounding any kind of psychiatric help in the military, and I think one of the main reasons people say no or refuse to seek treatment is just because there's so much stigma around it.
It is really important that at least an initial meeting is mandatory, because a lot of times mental issues are really hard to identify, especially if they're your own mental issues, and identifying them early by a trained psychiatrist or therapist.
We will now vote on the motion to open debate. All those in favor, please raise your placards now. All those opposed? This motion clearly passes. We are now on moderated debate. Are there any points or motions at this time? The chair would smile upon a motion to discuss possible research solutions that were came up with over the evening. We will vote on the 7-minute moderated caucus with a 30-second speaking time on research done since yesterday. All those in favor, please raise your placards now. This motion clearly passes. We are now on the 7-minute moderated caucus.
In my research, I found that a lot of members of the military and veterans don't actually know about the benefits and things that they're offered after they are discharged. And so I think one thing that we can do to just raise awareness of the benefits that they have is start campaigns.
I, like others, researched about why many veterans are not in Veterans Affairs, and one of the big issues is accessibility. If they're mentally ill, they might also not understand, so we should give them their benefits before they become mentally ill so we can help them.
And habituation is really this idea that you sort of start to move past all of those sensors that trigger something. So for example, having a family might trigger his remorse in the situation that he could have just killed the baby of another family. And basically, that ability to talk to civilians is something that a lot of people say could help soldiers move past.
This excerpt really shows how difficult it is for our veterans to discuss what they've experienced with other civilians. The fact that he couldn't tell his own wife about what is happening to him and about his PTSD just shows how deeply affected our veterans are in talking to people about their life experiences.
I think it's really important to A, educate our civilians further about what goes on in wars, and B, create more vet support groups where veterans can talk to other veterans who have been through kind of the same types of things, which makes it a lot easier for you to share what you're feeling and how you're dealing with it.
How much we need every military member to see a psychiatrist, because we do not want our veterans to have to live with this trauma and their PTSD for the remainder of their lives.
Also really important to mention, in addition to educating the public about the PTSD and all the mental health that is going around, I think that we should make sure that there's a right balance. I think that we need to make sure that the media is portraying the military correctly. While that may include some negative parts, I think that should also include some positive parts.
I don't think we should be trying to control the balance of positive and negative. I think we should be including everything about the experience.
I believe that it doesn't really matter what we portray in the media, since regardless of what happens, we can't control the vast media, and generally people don't really listen to the government media sources.
That I agree that there should be a therapy that veterans receive should be taken by a case-by-case basis, and I think that part of this is giving resources to everyone and giving access to therapy to everyone. And then I disagree though that not everyone needs therapy. I think that there should be at least a required therapy or sessions for 3 months after discharge, just to ensure that they're reintegrating into society well.
Although there is obviously freedom of the press and the media can say what they want, we can attempt to put out stories of veterans, which don't have to be positive or negative. It's up to a person's interpretation, but that show the real struggles of veterans.
If we put out more information about it, the judgment and stigma that comes from the general population, that would be reduced.
I would like to state that we are not saying we are going to control the media. We're saying that we are going to educate the media. We're just giving them information, and we're trying to help them understand what our veterans go through.
Perhaps we could create a website in which veterans are free to post their personal experiences about being in the military, which is open to all the public to view, and it's also endorsed by us, the government. And I think that this would be a really great learning resource for the public to utilize.
That we really need an incentive to get these veterans to share their stories. And in addition, I also agree with what Representative Brownlee said, that the website might not be the best way to reach everyone, but I do think that we should still have the website.
We could commission veterans who enjoy writing to write stories for us, or we could buy rights to books already on the market and post them in little tidbits on our website. Thank you.
A lot of veterans feel a feeling of isolation from the rest of their civilians, and they wish that they could understand them better. So I think that especially if we add an anonymous way to post on this website, it could be a really great resource so that civilians can understand them better.
I think that we should have a website, but then run ads for it on mainstream platforms such as social media or popular news shows, and also for content, like I think Representative Ray Dragon brought up. We should have incentives, and also for the veterans who want to share, we can have therapists recommend posting stories as a way to cope with their experiences.
We need to educate the media. Making a website won't help. While the goals are there, the idea is not sufficient.
I think that having both in-person meetings with veterans and having a website would be beneficial, because there's no way to get a veteran in every city in the U.S. or in a lot of places, whereas a website is much more accessible to everyone.
Now moving on to Representative Frankel's motion for a 7-minute unmoderated caucus. All those in favor of entering the caucus? All those opposed? This motion passes. Delegates, we are now in a 7-minute unmoderated caucus.
Educational side, and I feel like there's also a side that's more like one-on-one with like civilians and a veteran. So I think it's two separate things.
And I do believe that actually, like, when every veteran is like discharged and put back into regular life, they are they are set up with someone in that area or family, so they can start building community. And I think that would really help reintegrate into society. And
Adding on to what Congressperson Lamb said, and a point that Congressperson Takano brought up in our unmod, was educating the youth through partnerships with schools. I think it's a really beneficial way for the youth to connect with veterans and for veterans to connect with youth.
Is that we should set up a social media, as many of the youth in the United States use social media. However, another point brought up by Congressperson Brownlee in the unmoderated caucus was that there's a lot of trolls on these certain social medias which could leave comments, which could be seen by the specific veteran who posted his story or her story, and could affect the veteran's mental health.
My first idea is taking from the website stories we could print out and integrate into English classes, reading and analyzing their stories and thinking about their experiences.
I think that most veterans probably don't use social media apps that are used mainly by youth. I think that if we just add links, for example, to sites where you can't leave comments, like, and it's advertised through social media, rather than just like being on social media, their story, it's like a link to another site where trolls can't leave comments or anything.
Now we could start a program similar to the one Human Library Project, I believe it's called, in which people go to schools, people sign up or check out basically different people, and then they just go talk with those people and learn their stories. We could do something similar with veterans.
I would like to endorse all of the ideas regarding how we can implement these topics into our education. I really support this idea, and I think it would be highly effective.
And with that, the time for this moderated caucus has elapsed. Are there any points or motions at this time? The agenda is now set to reintegration training and then combat. With that being said, the chair will smile upon a motion for moderated discussion under the first agenda item.
In this program, the VA would open up job opportunities specifically for veterans. And what this does is it kills two birds with one stone. So the first is that veterans need jobs, and this also allows them to stay connected to the military environment and community, regardless of whether they can return back to war or not.
I believe there are two main parts to reintegration for veterans. The first is connection. Not only is this veteran to civilian connections, like Representative Boss mentioned, but it's also veteran to veteran connections, as well as veteran to therapy connections. These are all very important for this reintegration.
Has proposed. Reintegration is not only about giving veterans a stable future economic life, but also a stable mental life.
We will now vote on the 6-minute unmoderated caucus. All those in favor, please raise your placards now. Keep them up. All those opposed? Reminder, delegates, we must vote in all procedural matters, but this motion does in fact pass.
Okay, so just do that on section 3.
Okay, yeah. What? No, I'm trying to find a hotspot.
thought is.
Alexa, do you have any? Did you get Wi-Fi?
So are we talking about like psychiatric health after you've gone
For like field trips, to make those accessible, and then like where we would provide the curriculum. Needs to
Also,
have
are
like
we
6
offering
weeks
this as an
of it or
elective,
something?
as an after-school program, or as a mandatory class?
I think a mandatory class.
Mandatory class and options for a deeper look in after-school classes.
The lack of connection between civilians and veterans.
Yeah, because the other one is we're gonna say.
Oh yeah. So yeah, there's definitely there's a lack of connection between civilians and veterans.
Stanford. We have the majority, so we can introduce it, and then we need 12 people to enter voting procedures.
Enough of a curriculum to make an impact without taking away from other English units, and then providing funding for resources and field trips, visit local VA centers and hospitals.
I understand that there are some bills that are getting close to being completed. However, for the sake of efficiency and allowing for all issues to be discussed, we would like to ultimately vote on them tomorrow once more issues are discussed, and you can include more solutions as we move along. It looks like obviously there's a lot of legislation to get through. So this morning we will be introducing and voting on a lot of resolutions and bills. And ultimately, hopefully we will pass some things that will cause serious change to the issues that have been addressed this weekend.
I motion to introduce a bill.
All those in favor, please raise your placards now. Keep them up. All those opposed? This motion passes.
Our bill is the Psychiatric Support for Active Duty Service Members bill. Having seen that mental health issues among the active duty service members are extremely common.
Recognizing that soldiers experience and witness horrific atrocities that leave permanent imprints on their mental health.
Acknowledging that access to mental health resources as psychiatrists and therapists are lacking.
I fear that many of these numbers mentioned in the bill may be arbitrary. I was wondering if you could provide an explanation for how you arrived at the number.
These numbers are not arbitrary. Each psychiatrist was 6,500. There will be 200. For every 200 soldiers, there will be one psychiatrist. In addition, we are paying the psychiatrist $70,000 a year.
Although I believe that this bill does have some good ideas in it, one of the things I'm most worried about is how diagnosis would work over Zoom. As a few days ago, Representative Levin pointed out, body language is a big part, or could be a big part, of diagnosis of a person for a mental disorder.
There will be in-person psychiatrists. That's not getting removed. It just means if you don't have this, if you can't visit that, you have this online one as a preliminary resource.
I think this bill is an amazing solution to our problem, and I believe that, and it has been proven that online therapy is highly effective.
We're talking about the military. There are so many people who are willingly going out into combat and risking their lives for our country. And I don't think that it would be any different with therapists. There are going to be people who would want to go out into combat and help our service members.
On to the motion to introduce the Bipartisan Mental Health VA Act. Please raise your placards now. All those opposed? This motion passes.
So this is the bipartisan mental health bill for trainees in training. We acknowledge that there's a lack of mental support for military members, trainees, and veterans.
Moving to the motion to introduce the Mental Health Training for Field Service Members bill. Please raise your placards now. All those opposed? This motion passes.
Its goal is also to provide mental health training to recruits who are training for the Army. This bill may be a little bit more specific, and it also recommends meeting with psychiatrists more often, that is, at least every 2 weeks.
Who would be creating the curriculum for the mental health training course?
We would have professionals create that curriculum, and while it's not mentioned, and it's not mentioned in this bill, we can make an amendment for that.
Are there any points or motions? Representative Moore.
Motion to introduce the amending Veterans Affairs bill.
That is in order. This motion passes. Will the sponsors of the amending Veterans Affairs bill please come to the front of the room?
We all know that Veterans Affairs has many problems right now, and that is the reason that many veterans aren't joining. So this bill is about sort of fixing those problems and making it easier for more veterans to join Veterans Affairs.
This committee has realized that there is a significant disconnection between normal civilians and veterans, and especially between young people and veterans.
So we would be creating a 4-class curriculum to analyze different stories written by veterans, as we have veterans on these websites that we have previously discussed in debate. I think that merging this bill and the previous education bill would be highly beneficial because, as it is, many schools are having to cut things out of their curriculum. So posting this educational content on the VA website with the other resources. We've created this mental health support after discharge bill, bearing in mind that often the most severe mental health detriments happen after the soldiers are discharged and after they have time to reflect. And we've created this with the hopes that every soldier and veteran after the war will receive adequate mental health support that they need.
All those in favor of entering voting procedure, please raise your placards now. All those opposed? This motion passes. We are now in voting procedure. Would the doors please be barred? Delegates, we are going to vote on these bills in the order that they were introduced, and we will entertain one for and one against speaker prior to voting for each bill.
Veterans continuously are diagnosed with PTSD and mental disorders, but they are not but they feel like they shouldn't be evacuated. In addition, sometimes they're just not diagnosed because they refuse to go to any mental health services. That's why this bill is required.
I see a few issues with this bill. One, as they have these numbers of 6,500 psychiatrists there to help these military members be diagnosed with their trauma and get over their trauma, I believe that that number is possibly needs to be larger and increased so that the military members can get the adequate care that they need.
All those in favor of passing the Psychiatric Support for Active Duty Service Members bill, please raise your placard now. All those opposed? This bill is adopted. Yeah. Clapping is in order, delegates.
This bill is a great bill because it allows us to teach younger students and still entertain them. And also, it's about puppies.
Even if we assumed that we had funding for this plan, even if you believed that we could fully implement it, dogs just are not the right choice. We need to choose a better animal, sincerely, whether that's a cat or another one.
We will now vote on this piece of legislation. A reminder that with a quorum of 18, 10 votes are required to pass this bill. All those in favor of passing the Puppies Assisting Wounded Service Members to Veterans Therapy Action Center bill, please raise your placards now. All those against? This bill is also adopted. With that, we will now vote on the amending Veterans Affairs bill. All those in favor of passing this bill, please raise your placards now. All those opposed? Those abstaining? This bill is adopted. Moving finally on to the mental health support after discharge. All those in favor of passing the mental health support after discharge bill, please raise your placards now. All those opposed? This bill is adopted.
Motion to end debate.
That is in order. We will now vote on the motion to end debate. All those in favor, please raise your placards now. All those opposed? This motion passes.
Happy Sunday. I'm Olivia Chinchilla, the Policy Director in the House Veterans Affairs Committee. I was super happy that this committee not only debated policy, but actually got to read 7 excerpts closely from military members or military scholars, particularly on the work that they did, whether in the military or studying the military, and through that lens, that's how we approached policy. So first we went through the excerpts, we talked and debated about the issues within them. For example, what is it like to go in ground combat door to door? What is it like if you are, let's say, a psychological operations soldier? How do you react differently to seeing different traumas of war? And particularly, what is it that you most need in that capacity? And then through that lens, we then stepped into the policy arena and talked a little bit about policy proposals for changing veterans affairs and issues, and particularly as well some of the training. And I was really, really taken aback by this committee's capacity for rethinking and reimagining what we have and what we think. Because oftentimes when we think about policy, we're saying, okay, within this sphere, what can we change? But really it's not about being within a sphere, it's about stepping outside of that sphere. And I feel like that is particularly what this committee did. So they came up with 9 different policy proposals, 7 of which passed, and particularly addressing mostly mental health within the military, both with training and with after return from war. And one of the things too that the committee thought anew was particularly looking at the issues of in training starting and normalizing getting help for any issues that you have.
This past weekend, we discussed 3 main topics within the Veterans Affairs Committee. The first is mental health. This was one that I was especially passionate about. Within mental health, we discussed topics ranging from how we can improve the livelihoods of veterans post-war to make sure that they are okay and that ADHD does not become an issue in the long term, as well as how we can improve the lives of these military trainees before they begin war and how we can prepare them to make sure that they have the right mindset going into war.
Good afternoon, delegates, fellow chairs, policy directors, and parents. My name is Nick Hitahara, and I was one of the chairs for the House Veterans Affairs Committee. And this weekend, we certainly got a lot done. I will say, in my countless Model UN conferences, I have never seen so much legislation passed, and I'm sure anyone from our committee today can tell you how we had a rapid-fire round of 9 bills, all being passed, with a lot of consensus and agreement from the entire committee. And I would like to point out that on Friday and Saturday, this committee had some of the most nuanced conversations that I've ever seen in Model UN conferences. We are talking about all stages of the military experience, ranging from training to their actual experience in combat, and ultimately to reintegration into society. And there were so many issues that the committee highlighted, and ultimately when we got to writing, they were able to address them through a lot of consensus and agreement and create serious change that would help people in the real world.
We're 15, about to turn 16.